It'll take a second.
Aha, okay.
And Delegate Boyce is just entering.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right. Okay, we are now live. So thank you, Delegate Ruth.
Yeah, thank you. Important
Over
catch
here.
there, so thank you, yeah. Okay, so Kristen, could I ask you to review Delegate Stewart's bill, and Delegate Stewart, you're welcome to chime in, of course, and the amendments that he has proposed.
Sure. And so in the meeting materials, I did hand out, I believe, a reprint copy of the amended bill. And so the amended bill would address high PAH sealant products. It would prohibit on and after October 1, 2023, a person from supplying, selling a high PAH sealant product for application to a driveway or parking area. And it would also prohibit the application of a high PAH sealant product. So what the amendments do, it takes out the references to coal tar. The bill came in as introduced with labeling, requirements for labeling standards. Those are taken out with the amendments. There are penalty provisions in this bill, and the amended bill, in addition to the civil penalty that was included in the bill as introduced, it would add a penalty for an administrative penalty up to $2,500 for each violation, but not exceeding $100,000 total.
Okay, thank you. And I guess Delegate Stewart, I mean, I know you discussed this in the hearing, the fact that there, I guess the Senate preferred the reference to coal tar, is that right? But then I guess we're reverting back to the emphasis on high pH sealant product. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So the way that we passed this bill out of the House last year was a ban on high pH sealant. pHs are the toxins that are in these sealants. Those are the ones that we're worried about. The Senate preferred to just zero in on coal tar sealants. But as we heard from Sean Campbell, who has the largest manufacturer in the state, his point is that not all coal tar sealants are necessarily high in PAH, and that not all high PAH sealants are necessarily high in coal tar, have any coal tar whatsoever. And that's basically the justification we used to do this last year. The Senate pushed back, but after conferring with Sean, with other stakeholders, and with crucially my cross-file, Senator Kagan, I think everyone's comfortable with us taking this approach. Now, that's no guarantee to what the Senate is going to do to the bill again. I can't predict that, but at least my cross-file is comfortable with this approach and basically putting the bill back in the same posture as that passed the House last year, with a couple exceptions. Actually, this is a bit of a more industry-friendly bill, actually, than we passed last year in three respects. So first, I have taken out any reference to manufacturing in the bill whatsoever. So there's no prohibition on manufacturing these sealants in the state, whether you're sending it in-state, out-of-state, whatever. There's no prohibition on that. And that's just to try to limit the impact on jobs, on Maryland jobs, basically. And so that in that way, this bill is actually more pro-manufacturer than the one we passed last year. Number two, I've taken out any labeling provisions, as Kristen mentioned, whatsoever. I initially intended the labeling to be pro-manufacturer. I wanted to give manufacturers who were taking a higher road with these products the ability to label their products so consumers understood that. But Sean said that the labeling just gets kind of confusing and may end up having unintended consequences on manufacturers. So Sean Campbell at Seaboard Asphalt said, better to just strike that. And so that's fine. I've taken out the labeling stuff altogether. And then lastly, I think, Kristen, we've added some explicit exemptions in the bill that we also heard about a little bit during the testimony. We're explicitly exempting federal facilities, military facilities, and airports, just to be clear that we're not talking about those, because my understanding is that in some respects, some of these special facilities require certain types of sealant in different scenarios. And we obviously don't want to have any sort of separation or federalism problem where we're telling the federal government or an international airport what to do. So the bill is very, very simple. It's just about selling and applying high PAH sealants. It puts the bill in line with what we did last year and with what a number of other states and other jurisdictions have pursued. And happy to field any questions.
Okay. Delegate Stewart, just as sort of I'm slowly remembering, the discussion from last year. So I know you've changed the definition, changed it to apply to high pH sealant products. You have a clear definition in there. And using that definition, everyone in the industry would know what is a high pH sealant product. Is that right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are actually lists of every single one of these sealants and the pH content that different organizations and different federal and state agencies create. So there's actually a schedule of this. There wouldn't be any ambiguity about which ones apply.
Great. Other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Delegate Otto, sure.
This is just applying to the parking lots and driveways and things. I mean,
Yeah.
I think one of our concerns and some of the discussion a couple of years ago was about the tanks and wastewater treatment plants and things like that that use some types of these sealants.
Yeah, that's actually, thank you, Delgado. I neglected to clarify that. Yeah, so that's actually one of the threshold things that folks should know is that we're just talking about parking lots and driveways, period. It says that explicitly in the bill. No other uses we're concerned about. And the reason is it's the driveways and the parking lots that folks are walking on, and then they're tracking this stuff into their house. And as we've talked about a bunch of times over the years, if kids ingest this either directly hand to mouth or indirectly, like on a toy, their cancer risk skyrockets. So that's what we're trying to avoid. So I'm not worried about wastewater treatment, not worried about airport runways, all these other things that people don't generally walk on, just driveways and just parking lots.
That sounds better.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? I do have one more question for you, Delegate Stewart, but
Sure.
Other folks have questions? Okay, Delegate Stewart, how about the penalties? Is that provision, for example, the administrative penalty, is that different from last year, or is that the same as?
Yeah, see, Tyler has turned his camera on because he actually helped us come up with this penalty provision. And basically what kind of became a little bit wonky is that the Senate attached a cap to the penalty. And so then with Tyler and MDE's input, we needed to change the language a little bit to kind of clean up the Senate's mess. So Tyler, if you don't mind explaining that a little bit more.
Sure. And so with the addition of the administrative penalty, that allows us to not have to, take somebody to court over a $2,500 potential fine. And so we really can't even go to court for under $2,500. And so having an administrative penalty there would allow us to, enforce the law effectively without having to have these civil penalties only.
Yeah, we didn't have a cap last year in the House version, but the Senate wanted to add a penalty cap on, but they inadvertently made MDE's life a little bit harder. So we just wanted to clean that up.
So the cap that is in statute for the section this is amending is $10,000. And so having that $2,500, just exactly what the delegate said, just makes it easier for us.
10,000, the actual text says 100,000 total.
So it would have been $10,000 per violation with a $100,000 cap.
Oh,
So the new provision is $2,500, administrative penalty or $2,500 civil penalty per violation. And then there is the cap on the backside if you have a ton of violations.
Yeah, if you have innumerable violations, it would take you a long time to amass enough violations to get to 100,000.
What's considered a violation?
well,
Selling this or applying this stuff that we're banning. So basically, if you're a contractor and you apply this to a parking lot that's not a federal facility, that's not a airport, and you apply it, then that's a violation. And then if you
Per application
per application
or property or whatever.
Yeah. And then, and actually this is one of the lower fines. If you look at the other states and jurisdictions that have done this is actually one of the lowest fines in the country.
And with the fine, so the fine will be applicable to the contractor. Would there be any fine on the person receiving the application?
No.
Okay. Or I guess they could, or if the contractor said they were told to use this, I bet,
No.
Yeah. Okay.
And a regular consumer can't buy this anyway, correct?
Correct.
So,
and Ace Hardware and Lowe's, I mean, they already stopped selling this stuff like 15 years ago.
well, yeah, that's not my point. My point is that as a consumer, I can't decide that I'm gonna do my own driveway and buy this stuff anyway.
Right.
Can I buy this stuff myself? Personally,
No.
like not as a contractor?
No.
Is it used in like municipalities or local governments? I know they've been doing a lot of sealing because we took the highway user funds from them of trying to preserve their roads. Is it some products used that, and that, or?
We're not, I spoke with MML and Mako last year. I'm not aware of any municipality or county that's using this stuff. Not anymore.
Okay. I know they're using some sealants in Wycomico County and in Salisbury, but I don't know what they're the makeup of them, but.
Yeah, we've never heard from any of them that this would be an issue.
Okay.
And I have one final question I think is important. How is this enforced?
MDE would enforce.
Through inspection?
No regular inspection.
So talk about the process, so is it someone reporting?
Yeah, Tyler, you go ahead.
Yeah, I believe that it would be complaint driven. And so it would be, if it's reported, then we would investigate.
Right.
So
And
then
then I guess the
Tyler,
question would be,
Okay.
how would someone know in other words, how's a regular person, it sounds like this is just all contractors, how would somebody know to complain that a contractor has bought or sold or is applying this?
Well, a contractor could complain if a wholesaler or someone was selling it. So a contractor would know that themselves. And then someone could, a worker or another contractor for a rival contractor or whatever could complain if someone is, purchased this at some other, place and it finds out that they're applying it to someone's driveway or parking lot.
So, I mean, we could have this on the books and potentially people could still be buying this and applying this, even if they bought it out of state.
If they, I guess if they bought it out of state and applied it and they didn't tell anyone, then it's possible. I guess let me tap if he's available. Tom Ennis may be willing to explain a little bit about how this enforcement process has worked in other places. Tom, are you there and available to chat?
I am. Let me, start video. Okay. So yes, regarding the enforcement, yes, people could call you up with a complaint. And what we have is people who have asthma have a negative reaction to this. So if you're at an apartment complex and you all of a sudden you can't breathe and they just put down seal coat on your parking lot, you might pick up the phone and call MDE and complain. So I get phone calls from people all over the country who are physiologically affected by a seal coat job with coal tar. So that would be an indication that why someone might pick up the phone. And as the delegate Stewart had said, you do have sometimes contractors who want to play by the rules will see someone else using coal tar and call that in as well. So I would say, but to complement that, some education of the public, they need to know, do we have a new law? What's the new law? There would have to be an educational component to complement this bill at some level.
I don't know, because if I'm at a complex and my complex is laying this stuff down and I already have, I don't know. It's just like, how would I know to call? We're talking about the general individual. I just don't think the general person who struggles with asthma is going to know enough to pick up the phone and call, whether it's the local health department or MDE, to say that, oh, I think they're putting, this ceiling out here. And I know that's illegal. That's
right.
I'm just asking questions. I'm not just.
It's a fair question. I think the people, education is a complements this to get to your point. And how deeply will that education go and effective? I guess that's a good question. The other thing, I did the enforcement program for the city of Austin when we first passed our ban. We put up signs at the distribution locations so people knew contractors, because there are some contractors who come in from out of state who may maybe it's relatively rare, but they may be bringing material in across state lines. Well, if they know at the place where you typically buy this that you can't apply it anymore, so we would ask perhaps like someone like a manufacturer who or distributor who continues to sell coal tar, we would ask if we could put up signs. That would be a reasonable thing to do, to inform the contractors, just so they're not unknowingly violating the law. So that's another part of that education component.
Thanks, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Tower, just to follow up on the issue of how it's complaint driven. So I take it MDE has inspectors or staff who respond to complaints could be a wide variety of environmental problems. And so they'll get, I guess, presumably if this bill passes, they'll get trained on the enforcement of this, and they would, I guess, to a certain extent, to be a judgment call if you get a complaint from someone about a potential violation as to whether the inspector goes out and takes a sample of the coal tar the sealant that's been applied to determine whether it exceeds it or not. Is that right?
So I think on the enforcement front, since we would know which product they are applying, as the delegate had spoken about earlier, it should be pretty clear if it is a high PAH sealant or not.
Okay. So you wouldn't have to sample it. You would just, if there was some suspicion, you could ask whoever's put down the sealant what product, for information as to what product they apply.
That would be my understanding.
And if there is any question, there is a field test, cheap, inexpensive, readily available field test to test the product, so you know right away whether it has high PAHs or not.
Okay. All right. Other questions for Delegate Stewart or Tyler? So Delegate Stewart, I guess you don't anticipate any further amendments. Is that right? You're good to go with the bill as amended. Okay.
We boiled down the bill to basically its most simple essence, I think, right here.
Okay, great. Well, we can.
So is there any opposition now to it still, or?
Yes. Yeah. My understanding is I think a few of the interest groups that we heard from at the hearing are still going to be opposed regardless. But, we at least, I think, obviously taking the manufacturing piece out is, a boon for manufacturers, but I think folks are probably still going to have opposition.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, we can consider this further next week, and if the subcommittee is comfortable, then we can vote on it as amended. Great. Thank you, Delegate Stewart. All right. So now let's move to House Bill 131, Delegate Lehman's synthetic turf and turf infill. So Kristen could explain about what the bill does, and maybe explain that Delegate Lehman has some amendments. We might have some more.
Yeah, so the bill establishes tracking and reporting requirements for both producers and owners of synthetic turf and turf infill. The Department of the Environment will receive that information and publish the information on its website. There's penalty provisions associated with the bill. Delegate Lehman has submitted amendments. One copy was handed out. Those are just clarifying technical changes. She is working on amendments that were suggested by the Association of County Park and Recs. I think that's their association name. I don't think we've received them yet, but she is working to address a couple of the issues that were raised by that group.
Okay. And I guess so, as she introduced the bill, sort of the responsibility for who provides the chain of custody information, it's as of a particular date, as of start of 2023. The
producer shall
report that information.
And those And then the turf that's been installed as of January 1, 2023, the responsibility would then be on the owner of the installed turf.
Right. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about?
I
the
do.
bill?
I
Yeah,
do.
Delvin,
I
please.
remember in hearing, we talked about, so the quote unquote manufacturers of this, they say that they kind of tell people what their options are, and then they sell it, which they believe they don't have a responsibility. And then the people that they sell it to now, we're saying that they have the responsibility to say that they purchased it, and then they'll have the responsibility to then say where it goes. But I guess I'm still confused about whether or not the manufacturer still has to, in the chain, begin the chain of custody by saying that they sold it to who they're selling to begin with.
Kristen?
Sure. So beginning January 1st, 2023, the manufacturers are responsible for tracking the chain of custody of
Okay.
products.
Sorry.
And they would, it says that they would track from the manufacturer to, if known, their installation, use, reuse, recycling, or final disposal. So that some of that information is conditioned on if the manufacturer knows the information, like where it's installed, how it's disposed. And then those fields that are, or the turf that's already installed, it would be the owner of the turf that would have the responsibility to report to the department the current geographic location of the turf, and they would have the responsibility to report if it was reused, recycled, or how it was disposed.
Right. So I'm just assuring that each person who touches it has a responsibility to at some point report it.
So what the bill does, it's kind of two parts. So the manufacturers kind of moving forward would have that responsibility.
Right.
But the installed turf that's already here in the state, the owners will have that responsibility.
Oh, yes. Got it. Yes. Yes. I guess I was talking about initial purchase.
Right.
The
Moving,
initial-
it's going to come from the producer, not the
Yeah.
the owner.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Sorry.
So
Okay, Ruth?
that would be our rec and parks divisions and Montgomery County School System, and they would be responsible for it.
Well, I guess if it, under this bill, under the bill as it's currently written, if something was installed as of the start of 2023, then yes, they would be the ones who'd have to provide the chain of custody information. Delegate Ruth, did you have your hand up?
Any owner, whether it's, government or, private.
Yeah, just so my understanding from Delegate Lehman is it has to do with I think if I have this right, it has to do with the warranty, that when the warranty is up, it's the owner that's responsible for the chain of custody. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
Remember something on those lines. I can't.
Is there one of the advocates who can clarify that?
Yeah, is there anyone here who can help with that? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Diana Conway. I'm president of nonprofit Safe Healthy Playing Fields. I'm one of the advocates along with Martha Ainsworth from Sierra Club. The way I understand it to be written now, the duration of a warranty on synthetic turf is typically 8 to 10 years. So assuming it's 8 years, for example, the chain of custody rests, the duty to report the chain of custody rests with the manufacturer on a field that's not yet installed, rests with the manufacturer for the duration of the warranty. At the end of the warranty, it transfers to whoever the owner at that point is. So it would be, for example, the parks or a private school or a public school. And presumably there's some disclosure language that's boilerplate that goes along where in addition to turning over everything else, they let the current owner know that they have an obligation. So responsibility shifts with them. It seems to be different from the model that your chairman was describing in his industry, whereby everybody from the producer to the packager to the transporter to the final disposal of that kind of waste are all jointly responsible. And that may be related to the toxicity of that particular waste, but that is a different model. I don't think that's what's being proposed here. I think this is sequential and it moves along. And really the only question is, what are the points of transfer for that legal responsibility to report to MDE?
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'm missing something, but in the bill is introduced, I don't see warranty language. It seems like it's bifurcated depending on the date of installation.
I think Delegate Lehman sent an email that I saw somewhere along the line this morning indicating there were a couple amendments, one of which was, Martha.
Oh, yes, I was going to say that there was a discussion with the State Parks and Recreation Association, and they came up with an amendment that would require the producer to track it to the end of the warranty, and then it would be the owner that would track it later. But it's not in the current language. It's going to be in the amendment that you get.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
She also clarified, in case there's a question on that with them, that it's not intended to track the maintenance of the field. Sometimes to maintain the field, they have to add more infill during the course of the life of the field. And that's not being tracked in this bill, just where the whole field is going.
Okay. Great. We'll look for the amendment language. Yeah.
So they would just have to report when they were making a change or replacing it, or major repairs, or because much of it can still be utilized, I think.
I don't believe it applies to repairs. I think it's strictly installation and then movement.
Okay.
And movement could include reinstallation somewhere else, or it could include disposal of whatever kind.
Okay. Delegate Gilchrist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when I was looking at the bill, so this bill, is it strictly informational gathering?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer. I don't know if I should wait to be called on. Yes, this is strictly reporting. There's no expectation of anything beyond just reporting, and MDE posts it, and then the job is done until the next move and the next reporting and the next posting.
There have been different bills in about these artificial fields before. And so this one, it wouldn't require it to be recycled, and it wouldn't require it to be like used only 6 years as a field or something like that.
Correct. This has no requirement of anything except information.
And so we would collect a database, and the database might say the field was dumped somewhere and on this day and this year, and then that would be the end of the database?
Well, you might have some community activists who would notice that information and inquire whether that was an appropriate disposal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Diana or Martha maybe could help with this. I'm not familiar at all with reuse of synthetic turf, but let's say, a county school installs synthetic turf in their field. And so either, depending on with the amendment, I don't know if it's the manufacturer or the owner would have to report, but let's say then it's dug up and transferred to another jurisdiction for use in their field. Is then the jurisdiction that receives it or reuses it responsible for continuing the chain of custody reporting?
As it's written now, as the proposed amendment would write it, correct. It would shift with ownership of the field. Okay. Other questions?
Okay, we'll look for Delegate Lehman's amendment. We'll take that up next week. Thank you. And then,
Thank you.
oh, where did my list go? House Bill 149, riparian rights. And I know Kristen's going to give us an overview. You remember that the sponsor, Delegate Bagnall, said the hearing that she's going to be introducing a complementary bill. So we're probably not going to take any action until, on House Bill 149 until we see what that complementary bill is. But we might as well start the discussion. So Kristen, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. House Bill 149 requires MDE to establish and maintain a publicly available voluntary registry on its website of property owners who have registered a claim of riparian rights. And then MDE must determine, let me look at the bill. I'm looking at the fiscal note. It left my copy on my desk. I'm in the hearing room right now. Okay.
Kristen, you want me to run get it?
No, well, I mean, it's not loading. Hold on. I've had internet issues today. Let me try from the website. I'm on the House floor system. Okay, so with this registry, MDE will determine the information that a property owner must submit. There is a provision that says the governor shall appropriate funds to the department to cover the cost of establishing and maintaining the registry. And then there's a requirement that a holder of riparian rights, including community associations, must be provided notice of a proposed project in the immediate area of the property at the beginning of the state or local permitting or other approval process for the proposed project. So there's a notification provision there that somebody who has riparian rights would be notified of nearby projects.
Kristen, is it clear who has that responsibility?
No, I don't think it's clear here. It just says that the person or the holder of a covenant for riparian rights, including a community association, shall be provided notice, but it doesn't say who is providing that notice.
Okay, so one item to get clarified.
Yeah.
But questions about this. I must admit, last year's bill thoroughly confused me. Maybe because Roy was completely unfamiliar with riparian rights. This is a slimmed down version of last year's bill, though again, there's going to be a related one being introduced. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
I somewhat do,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Sure, Delegate Boyce.
I don't remember what the complementary, I'm looking at my notes. I don't remember what the complementary bill to this was supposed to be. Was it going to be essentially determining the who, or are we potentially looking at having to potentially merge two bills? I hate this topic, full disclosure.
From my understanding, I think the information came to the delegate's attention that her initial bill was pre-filed, so we already had it in her queue and it was scheduled for a hearing. After that process, she became aware of other approaches that could be helpful. Whether or not the committee is going to think these can work together or if they should be merged, I think we have to wait to the bill hearing to really see what what the second bill is actually covering. It hasn't been introduced yet, so we don't really know.
So we wait.
That's what the Chair Garvey had suggested, that perhaps we just wait since we know there's something else coming and it might add to the conversation and hopefully make things a little more clear.
Okay. Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I feel like I've come a long way on this topic. I have to admit, probably something like 18 months ago, I did not know what riparian rights were, despite like graduating from law school or whatever, that this is not a course they teach, or at least maybe if you go to like a really I don't know, water fronting law school or something. Maybe you can find a specialty course. But anyway, so I think I understand the bill. There are sort of two core components. One of them makes a lot of sense to me. The other one, I'm not sure why we're doing it. So the one that makes sense to me, or why we would do it, the one that makes sense to me is that a property owner who thinks or has riparian rights would need to notify a community association before some sort of project. To me, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that goes to kind of the fact pattern that was the impetus for all of these bills that we've heard, where there was some sort of issue in Delegate Bagnall's community along around Annapolis and Anne Arundel County or whatever, about some community group that had a conflict with a homeowner. And that makes sense. Like, that notice process is really, I feel like it's pretty easy to know if there's a community association in your neighborhood. You pick up the phone and you give them a call, or you send them a certified letter. That makes a lot of sense to me. What I don't necessarily get, and this is, I think, fueling the fiscal note, which is, something like 300,000 initially and goes down to like 250 or something. What I don't get is why we would require MDE to set up a voluntary database. Because number one, it's sort of costly for them MDE to do it according to the fiscal note. But then number two, I'm not really sure how many people would volunteer to log their riparian rights. I don't know how many takers we would get. And if we only get a small percentage of buy-in, I'm not sure how useful the database is at that point. And then number three, and this is probably my ignorance rather than a problem with the bill, I don't understand the link between why we would need the database to also to have the notice provision. It seems like the notice provision could stand alone without the database. Does that all make sense to Kristen or anyone else who feels like they've mastered this topic? Like,
is there any other source of information about who claims riparian rights if we didn't have a database? Or maybe Tower, do you want to jump in on this?
Sure. So if you are a waterfront property owner, and if your property is butting up to the water, generally you do own riparian rights. There are areas in which those rights are more or less restricted, but restricted in a way that doesn't allow you to build a pier, or doesn't allow you to do your own riprap, but doesn't, change that riparian right factor. In the situation that had occurred that sparked this bill, the community association owned a strip of land at the end of the property owner's property between them and the water. And so that riparian right was contested due to changing of the tide and sea level rise. I won't get into that too much more here, but generally looking at SDAT, you can determine who is a riparian rights holder. You generally don't have a certificate saying I have riparian rights, although that would, I guess, be your deed. And so they're not logged and registered. And this would be a voluntary registry where you could log your riparian rights if you believed you had riparian rights, and you could submit documents that you thought certified your riparian rights, but does not require certification of those rights from the department.
okay.
Is that, Delegate Stewart, does that help?
Yeah, it does help. Thank you.
And this, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Sure.
This would not, if you did not voluntarily register them, you wouldn't be negating your riparian rights. Is
No,
that
you would not.
correct?
That's correct. But again, we do know that the delegate is working on, I think, an approach that, I don't want to breach confidentiality. I know she spoke a little bit publicly about her approach, but I think it'd be really helpful to have that bill before us to really
Fair enough.
just to see the approach. I think that bill might be a little more clear on who has responsibilities.
Okay. All right. So I guess we'll just defer until that bill is heard, introduced and heard. Okay. well, then we are, and actually, does anyone else have any questions about this? Oh, Delegate Boyce, I'm sorry.
I did, but I give up. I give up today. Today is the day I give up. Tomorrow.
I just remember, we will have a second bill hearing in a sense.
No, I know. I just
A lot of this, I think this will get teased out a little more. The bill hearing that we had on this bill was pretty short because of the knowledge that there's going to be this other proposal coming in. So I'm hopeful that.
I'm hopeful too. I mean, year after year, it's been, I get it. And then the next year I don't get it. So
it's complicated.
It is complicated, but I think we all want to get the complication. But yeah, I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And anyone else? No, as I said, I mean, last year, this topic thoroughly confused me. So hopefully we'll come up, we'll all be able to talk now, which will be about riparian rights and what the two bills do once we have the hearing for the second bill, or at least we can hope. Okay, well then we are done. Any other questions or comments for the good of the subcommittee before we adjourn? All right, well, just assume we'll be meeting on a regular basis every Wednesday after bill hearings. So we'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you. Bye-bye.